Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Vanessa. I have a master's in nutritional science, and today we're going to talk about the no added sugar claim made in many of our foods and why even though a food claims to have no added sugar, it can still contain sugar, artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohol, monk fruit, stevia, and allulose. And I'm going to show you exactly where you can check to see what kind of sugar or sweeteners you are consuming by looking at the ingredient list and the nutrition label. I have a couple of examples set for you guys, but before we get started, I have to remind you of a couple things. The first one is that most claims that are made in our foods by food manufacturers are set, defined, and regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. The Food and Drug Administration also gets to decide what ingredient qualifies as a sugar. And this is where things get a little bit tricky because there's some ingredients that taste sweet and that are used to sweeten our foods, but the FDA does not consider them to be sugar. This will include any ingredient that is an artificial sweetener, any sugar alcohols, monk fruit, stevia, and allulose. The FDA only considers ingredients to be sugar if they contain sugar molecules. So this list is going to include anything from agave, honey, maple syrup, cane sugar, brown sugar, coconut sugar, date syrup, high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, maltodextrin. All of these ingredients are made up of sugar molecules. Therefore, the FDA says, yes, we can call them and categorize them sugar. But again, anything that is an artificial sweetener, that is your Splenda, your Equal, your Sweet and Low, any sugar alcohol like sorbitol, xylitol, any monk fruit, any stevia and allulose, these ingredients, per the FDA, are not considered to be sugar. This technicality is so important because this is how food manufacturers are able to get away with using this no added sugar claim in the foods that they sell to us at the grocery store, but they can still sweeten our food with these sweeteners or sugars that the FDA does not consider to be sugar. Okay, I have a couple of examples for us to go over that I think are really going to help to clarify what I am saying. Okay, the first one that we're going to go over is this Heinz no sugar added tomato ketchup. The first thing that you want to do is you want to look at the nutrition label and you want to look under the added sugar portion. Now, here's a tip. If a food product is claiming to have no added sugar, 100% of the time, every time you look at the added sugar portion of the nutrition label, it is always going to be 0 grams, 100% of the time, because the food product cannot claim to have no sugar added and then add sugar. They can't do that. That is against the FDA regulation. The FDA is a federal agency, so these are kind of like food laws that food manufacturers have to follow. Okay, now the fact that it says no sugar added doesn't mean that it has 0 sugar. It just doesn't have one of these sugar ingredients or that the FDA considers to be sugar added into the food product. But it can still have sugar coming from, a natural source, and it can still have one of these other ingredients that the FDA says they're not technically sugar. Now, the way that you are going to know is by looking at the ingredient list. When you look at the ingredient list, you're going to see sucralose listed. Now, sucralose is an artificial sweetener. Sucralose is the chemical name for Splenda, an artificial sweetener. But since the FDA does not consider it to be sugar, that's why you see in the nutrition label, added sugars is 0, even though it was added to the food and it sweetens the food. And that 1 gram of total sugar is coming from a natural source, most likely the tomato concentrate. So when you come across a product like this that claims to have no added sugar, look at your label. If the food product is claiming to have no added sugar, but it does have an amount of sugar listed under total sugars, that means that that sugar is coming from natural sources. And to know what that natural source is, you have to look at the ingredient list. So I did say that the natural source most likely in this tomato ketchup example is going to be coming from the tomato concentrate. But you have to keep looking at the ingredient list to see if there's any other sweetener. This one used an artificial sweetener. So you get the whole picture and you get to decide, do I want to buy this ketchup that is sweetened naturally with the tomato concentrate and with Splenda, or do I want to look around and maybe, buy something different? The reason that I say that is because you can be somebody who's trying to avoid artificial sweeteners and you're not purchasing Equal or Splenda or Sweet and Low, but you may be purchasing food products that are sweetened with these artificial sweeteners. The thing is, when these artificial sweeteners are used in the food products, they're 100% going to be listed under the ingredient list, but they're going to be listed under their chemical name. So one thing I would suggest if you're trying to avoid artificial sweeteners, just memorize the chemical names. There's literally only 4 artificial sweeteners that are used in our foods. Those are going to be sucralose, which is the chemical name for Splenda, aspartame, which is the chemical name for Equal, saccharin, which is the chemical name for Sweet and Low, and asulfame potassium, which is the chemical name for Sweet One. So once you memorize these 4 artificial sweeteners, you're going to be able to spot them so quickly when you look at the ingredient list. Now let's move on to our next example. These are Outshine popsicles. You see the no sugar added claim made. Okay, awesome. Let's take a look at the nutrition label to see how much sugar is coming from natural sources. Because remember, if a food product claims to have no sugar added, you 100% can bet that under the added sugar section of the nutrition label, it's going to have 0 grams. Always, 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 always. When you keep looking at this label, you're going to see that sugar alcohols are actually listed. Now, here's the catch with sugar alcohols. If a food manufacturer uses a sugar alcohol as an ingredient in the food product to sweeten the food, they don't have to list it under the nutrition label. But there is one exception. If the food manufacturer makes any claim about sugar anywhere in their food product and they use the sugar alcohol, they have to list it under the label. So that's why sometimes you're going to see sugar alcohols listed and sometimes you're not. It really depends if the food manufacturer made a claim about sugar and the food product. But in this example, they did make a claim about sugar. They claim that these popsicles have no added sugar. That's why they had to list the amount of sugar alcohol used for the popsicles. And we see that's about 2 grams. If you look at the total sugar, you're going to see 1 gram. So that's already giving us clues. Okay, one popsicle has 2 grams of sugar alcohol and it has 1 gram of sugar coming from a natural source. Now, to know what source that is and what kind of sugar alcohol was being used, and if there's any other sweeteners used, because remember, if they also used artificial sweeteners or something like monk fruit or stevia or allulose, that's not going to show up in the nutrition label. That is going to show up under the ingredient list. Now, when we look at this ingredient list, you're going to see sorbitol listed. Sorbitol was the sugar alcohol used to sweeten these popsicles. So here's how you can spot sugar alcohols when you look at the ingredient list. Any ingredient that ends in OL is typically going to be a sugar alcohol. So this is your sorbitol, your xylitol, your erythritol, mannitol, lactitol, anything with that OL falls under the sugar alcohol category. Now, as you keep looking through the ingredient list, you're going to find 2 artificial sweeteners. You're going to find sucralose, which is the chemical name for Splenda, and you're also going to find asulfame potassium, which is another artificial sweetener. It's the chemical name for Sweet One. So to summarize, these popsicles have 1 gram of natural sugar coming from most likely the white grape juice concentrate and the strawberry juice concentrate. It's also sweetened with 2 grams of sugar alcohol, sorbitol, and it has 2 artificial sweeteners, Splenda and asulfame potassium. So again, with this information, you get to decide if you want to buy these popsicles. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, totally up to you. But if you just looked at the no sugar added claim in the front of this package, you might think, okay, cool, these don't have any added sugar. The sweetness that I'm tasting is coming from the fruit. Because if you look at the fruit product, it also does have that claim in the top that says made with real fruit or juice. Instead of it saying made with real fruit or juice, it should say made with real fruit or juice, a sugar alcohol, and 2 artificial sweeteners. That is the truth. But now you guys are able to spot, I mean, this information is not hidden, but you kind of have to know what you are looking for to be able to spot what kind of sweeteners are being used to sweeten the food. Okay, let's go on to our next example. So these are some fruit pouches, brain squeezers. You see here in the corner, it has the no added sugar claim. Okay, awesome. Remember, no added sugar doesn't mean that it has zero sugar. It just doesn't have an ingredient added that the FDA considers to be sugar. So you for sure, we're not going to find any like cane sugar or maple syrup or honey, anything like that to sweeten these fruit pouches. So let's look at the label. Again, since it is claiming to have no added sugar, when you look at the added sugar portion of the nutrition label, 100% of the time, it's going to say 0 grams. Now, when you look at the total sugar, it says 11 grams. So like I said, the fact that it has no added sugar doesn't mean that it doesn't have any sugar at all. In this example, it has 11 grams of sugar. And since this food product claimed to have no added sugar, the amount under the total sugar is coming from natural sources. So we want to take a look at the ingredient list to see what those natural sources are. And then we also want to check if there's any other sweetener that was used to sweeten these fruit pouches that the FDA doesn't consider to be sugar, because that won't be listed under the nutrition label, but we will 100% find that ingredient listed under the ingredient list. Now, when we look at this ingredient list, if you look at the mega apple flavor, you're going to read apples, apple puree concentrate, and ascorbic acid, which is just vitamin C. So good news for us, there is no artificial sweetener. I don't see any sucralose or saccharin or aspartame, sulfate, potassium. There is no ingredient that ends in OL. Remember, ingredients that end in OL are sugar alcohols. So there's no sugar alcohols. I don't see monk fruit. I don't see stevia. I don't see allulose. I just see apples and apple puree. So the 11 grams of sugar listed under the total sugar per pouch are coming from the fruit, from apples or apple puree. So this is good news, right? Because these most likely, someone who's going to purchase them is going to be like a parent. If you have kiddos, you might see that no added sugar, and that's great, right? Because, many parents don't want to give their kids anything that has added sugar. But remember, to get the whole picture of what kind of sweeteners are used and where that sugar is coming from, you have to look at the ingredient list to know how much sugar. That's when you look at the nutrition label. Okay, awesome. Let's go to our next example. This is the Fruit Cups, Del Monte Fruit Cups, and we see that no sugar added claim. Okay, so kind of same thing. If you just picked up this box and you read no sugar added, you might feel like super good. You're picking something that has no sugar added, and you would assume that the sweetness that you're tasting from these fruit cups is coming from the fruit. Okay, well, let's take a look at it. Let's start by looking at the nutrition label. So you look at the added sugars, it's 0 grams. What we expected, it's claiming to have no added sugars. Therefore, this is always going to say 0 grams under added sugar. Now, you look at the total sugar and it says 5 grams per fruit cup. Okay, so that's telling us that one fruit cup contains 5 grams of sugar. Since this food product is claiming to have no added sugar, then these 5 grams of sugar are coming from natural sources. They're naturally found in one of the ingredients. To know what that ingredient is, we have to look at the ingredient list. And that ingredient list is also going to tell us if there was another sweetener that was used. When you look at this list, you're going to see the fruit. You're going to see peaches, pears, cherries. And as you go down the list, you're also going to see stevia. Now, stevia is a sweetener. In our mind, it's a sugar, right? But the FDA doesn't consider stevia to be sugar. Therefore, food manufacturers can use something like stevia to sweeten their food products, but they don't have to list it as an added sugar in the nutrition label. And they can get away with labeling their foods as no sugar added. So instead of this saying no sugar added, it should say naturally sweetened with fruit and contains stevia. That way you know exactly what you are purchasing. So yeah, I mean, kind of misleading, but if you know where to check, you can just, look at the nutrition label or even just go straight to the ingredient list if you want to know what kind of sugar you are consuming. Okay, so we made it to our last example. This is a naked juice, piña colada. And if you see in the corner, it has that no sugar added claim. Okay, awesome. Let's take a look at the nutrition label to see how much sugar, if any, does it have. We'll start by looking at that added sugar section. It's going to say 0 grams. Awesome, that's what we expected because this food product is claiming to have no sugar added. Now, you want to look at the total sugar amount. Total sugar is listed as 26 grams. Since this food product is claiming to have no added sugar, then those 26 grams of sugar listed under total sugar are coming from a natural source. And to know what that natural source is, you have to look at the ingredient list. So when we look at the ingredient list, you also want to see if there's any other type of sweetener that was used that the FDA does not consider to be sugar. So when we look at this label, it's pretty much just fruit. So the sugar is coming from the pineapple juice, the apple juice, probably a little bit of the coconut milk, and the orange juice. There is no artificial sweetener. There's no ingredient that ends in OL. I don't see stevia, monk fruit, or allulose. So those 26 grams of sugar are coming from fruit. And this is where you get to decide. I think of all of the food products that we went over today, this one was the most truthful because it says no added sugar, and it does have a claim here on the bottom. All sugars come from the fruit and or vegetables, which is true, but it does still contain 26 grams of sugar. So that's where you get to decide, do I want to consume these 26 grams of sugar, which are coming from natural sources? I mean, that's totally up to you. We are all working on different things when it comes to our health, but at least like now, hey, it does have 26 grams of sugar, which is about the same amount of sugar found in those mini like Coke can bottles, but it is coming from fruit. So, up to you what you want to do with that. And that was our last example for today. I hope that you guys found this super helpful. Remember, when you see that no sugar added claim in foods, that doesn't mean it doesn't contain 0 sugar. It just doesn't have an ingredient that's considered to be sugar by the FDA that was added into the food product, but it can still contain naturally occurring sugar. It can still contain sugar alcohols, artificial sweeteners, stevia, monk fruit, or allulose. Okay, guys, thank you for watching. I will see you on the next one.